welcome. My name is Carron Little, and I'm the curator and organizer of Out of Sight Chicago. Today, I'm in conversation with Sophia Kidd, a Chinese scholar, artist, and curator. And I am coming to you from the ancestral homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Adwa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi peoples. Out of Sight, as an organization, is particularly interested in looking at what is invisible in our society and really facilitating conversations about the things that we don't talk about. It's we are about cultivating the questions. And we've been dedicated to working in public space since 2011. Sophia Kidd, who I'm with today, is founder of the Thexis Foundation and publisher of Igneous Press, has been a practicing spoken word as well as behavior and performance artist since the early 1990s, largely in Los Angeles, California, greater area. In 1999, she moved to China to learn about Chinese culture and art, and in 2009 made a decisive move to Chengdu, capital of the Sichuan province in southwest China. She has curated and collaborated with contemporary Southwest Chinese artists up to the present. She went on to get her master's and PhD degrees in classical Chinese aesthetics at Sichuan University, and today studies issues of translocal art practices and cultural hybridity and comparative cultural political economy. And so today we are going to be in conversation. We're both going to present our own work and our curatorial practices. So.
Good morning, Carron, and thank you so much for your introduction. And I think that I would like now to turn it around a little bit and introduce you, if I may.
Yes. Yeah.
Carron is a founder and organizer of Out of Sight Chicago that is dedicated to working in public space since 2011. Out of Sight was started to provide a support structure for public performance in Chicago and to facilitate a dialogue with the public about artistic and cultural ideas. Carron performs as Queen of Luxuria, devising interactive experiences that fuse poetry and performance. Carron gives visiting artist presentations on her work and Out of Sight nationally and internationally. In 2016, she was Chicago Swiss Artist in Residence supported by the Chicago International Sister City and the Swiss Benevolent Society of Chicago in Lucerne, Switzerland. Most recently, she was artist in residence at Burren College of Art, Ireland, visiting artist at Sarajevo Winter Literary Festival, Bosnia, guest artist at Weird's Festival 2018, Lucerne, Switzerland, artist in residence at Montgomery Community College, Maryland, and mentor to international artists from Japan, Switzerland, Turkey, Austria, and Bulgaria at the Water Tower Festival in Sofia, Bulgaria, and visiting artist at Paradox Symposia at Riga Art Academy, Latvia, where she presented her performance, If My Body Were You, and a performance workshop entitled Ecologies of Care. There's a lot in there I'm looking forward to talking about, and I'm very honored to be able to be here with you today, Carron. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We both traveled across the pond at the same time, which is interesting. I didn't realize that from your bio. So do you want to share your presentation and we'll get right into it?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I did prepare a short presentation just on a slice of some curatorial work that I did from 2010 to 2013, 14 in Chengdu. Once I'd found my community of artists out there, or a community that was sort of my first home community, away from home community. So I'll go ahead and share that. Let me pull that up. Are you seeing it?
I am indeed.
Okay, I'm going to start right at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it
everybody the best shot. So my name is Sophia Kidd, as Carron has shared with everybody. And today I want to focus a little bit upon the hybrid practice of artist and curator. So I'm going right to the first project that I found myself existing in this dual role. And it was an incubator project so that both myself and my co-curator, who I'll introduce just next, we both performed. Usually he would do experimental video and I would do performance art, spoken word in each of the 5 iterations that we had. And then we would invite 4 other artists to join us. So that was the scope of the project. So here you see Frequency Live Art in the upper left-hand corner was the name of our curatorial project. And some of the themes we explored were the notion of cultural capital, symbol creation, coding, and value. And those are each things that I could get into in detail. They were very specific concerns that I was having as an American in China and experiencing the cultural capital that I had. I wasn't a wealthy person, but having the education and the family background and the understanding of Western values and so forth gave me a lot of cultural capital, and I realized that, and so that was something I was exploring. But I also have founded incubating an arts nonprofit called Thexis Foundation, which is really interested in geocultural power, young and emerging curators, and the role that they can play in geocultural power, and creatives having people-to-people connections across regions, and then interweaving the local and the global experience as an international arts curator. And so then also I recently inherited a small publishing house from my father. He established Igneous Press in 1989. We mostly publish poetry, but we're expanding into literature, academic journals, and also arts publishing, hoping to be able to bring catalogs of artists in regions of the world where they can't publish in their own country, or for various reasons. And perhaps it's funding, perhaps it's the work represents something that isn't welcome in their art market, or for whatever reason it is, we want them to be able to make sure they have a platform for their voice and their work to be shared. This is Wu Chengdian, who I co-founded the Frequency Live Art Group with there in Chengdu, which is the capital of Sichuan province. It's not far from Tibet. We started hanging out. We met at a gallery called the Risi Art Space, which was sort of steward to the avant-garde artist circles at that time in 2010. And we would go to the park and have long conversations, drinking tea, whether it be green tea or pu'er tea. And one day we got to talking about the inter-art, or 跨界艺术, and sort of bringing musicians together with poets, with artists. So let's say the Dadaists in Berlin or in Zurich, they would have a huge show, and they'd have people come and make the costumes. They'd have Picasso paint the sets. They'd have a musician making the score, a really profound writer make the libretto. And so just bringing these different forms of art together is something that we wanted to explore. So he said, well, let's create a curatorial project and explore that here in the southwest of China. So we did. We had our first Frequency Live art exhibition in 2010. It was titled Symbolic Violence. I believe that's a concept that we had borrowed from Bourdieu and his discussion of how one semiotic system can be existing in a relationship of power with another semiotic system. And so that's sort of along the lines of the cultural capital, exploring that as well. One piece from that I really enjoyed was by He Liping, who is still very active today, and it was called Style is Key. What he did was he got together with his friends at some point and had a few beers at a bar. Then our exhibition, and this is something we did, we always had our exhibitions off-site in a commercial space, not in a white cube space. And so it was in a bar a famous literary bar in Chengdu, founded by He Duoling and Jia Yongming. Jia Yongming is probably the most well-known female poet in China, and He Duoling is a very well-known blue-chip Chinese painter of the native soil movement from the 1980s and 90s. So getting back to He Liping's piece, he took a 20-minute footage of the time he had with his friends drinking a few beers and expanded it to 3 hours, and then they reenacted the entire experience. And what this does is bring every attention to the minutia and the details of our everyday experiences by expanding them, by slowing them down and prolonging them. And so the stage in this picture, they're in one place in the bar, and then the stage of the performances are going on not very far away from that. So it's quite interesting to have staggered artworks all happening at the same time. Frequency 2 was the next year. It was called Code. And this piece by Zhang Mi, who is presently in Berlin, she is an Aboriginal, I believe she's Dai Aboriginal, and she in this piece abstained from articulating actual language and only used sounds to convey her meaning. And then she didn't want anybody to see her face because she was then isolating the variables of communication, of expression of her soul, not allowing the words to form themselves, and then not allowing anybody to view her visage, and wanting to understand the effects upon the psyche of the viewer in that experience. Frequency Live Art 3 was part of the 2011 Chengdu Biennale, and it was a really excellent experience being a part of that. Zhu Gang showed his work we usually had live work, but in this case, Zhu Gang only performs on the streets. He refuses to be sort of a show for anybody to see on a stage within an enclosed space. So in this piece, it was a piece about domestic violence and also about symbolic violence, but he pulled down his pants in a public square and laid meter sticks on the ground, and eventually the audience figured it out that he was inviting them to beat him on his behind. And it was interesting over the next 9 minutes to see what happened, the kind of fury that was kicked up in the audience, as they were angry that something was like this very abnormal thing was happening in their public space, and performance artists all quite less known, especially at that time in China. So I was actually present for that and was glad to be able to share that with the audience. So I want to keep this short. So we did have 5 iterations. This is I did perform in the 2012 4th exhibition with Astra 5, which is Astra is a series I've been doing since 2005. I've done, I just did the recent Astra 8 iteration in January. That's a piece I would actually love to talk about today if we had a chance. There's a lot to it about representation, and but I do have a little bit of other footage that I want to show you at the end. So then I performed again in Astra 6 with this piece that was, again, almost everything I did with Frequency was about language and poetry and performance. And that's for a reason, because I was deprived of using the English language to express myself to Chinese audiences. So I had to find workarounds. So a lot of my work dealt with that. Just along those lines of that poetry can't be translated. So I had to find other ways to convey the same meaning. And this is a piece that I did with Joe Bin's curatorial project called Up On, Chengdu International Performance Art Festival, and this dealt with the 5 elements and sacred geometry and geography as well. So this one here is quite interesting because you can see Ni Kun or Li Kun is in the back there sitting, and he's actually meditating in the presence of my artwork, and he's a part of it. And his reactions with his eyes closed, he can still feel it, and then he controls the light and the sound with his brain waves. So it's an active feedback experience going on during the performance. You can see this. So that was done with his mind. So I do want to keep this short. And it's a lot to try to pack into just a few minutes here, but I do welcome correspondence. So whatever we don't get answered for you today, or if you'd like to learn more about it, I welcome you to communicate with me at this email here. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophia. You know, it's really fascinating, and I look forward to unpacking more, you know, these ideas of practices, you know, and thinking about the local and the global. So I'm going to share one curatorial project and one art, well, maybe a few artistic works, but it's interesting because both Sophia and my practice intersect with poetry and performance, which is another big area for us to unpack today. But let me share my screen, and you know that I'll have to disappear for a while.
We'll miss you.
So let me do this. And so Out of Sight is a public performance festival, and I just wanted to situate this in the context of where I come from. So I grew up really in transit between these 2 sites. Easterhouse, Glasgow, at the time was one of the largest housing estates in Europe. And this island on the west coast of Scotland called Iona, which is home to a religious community that I grew up in called Iona Community. And it's actually where the Book of Kells was created in the 8th century. And so it has a really fascinating history. But as part of the ethos of that community, they sent the families to live in impoverished areas in inner cities in Aberdeen, Dundee, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. So we were one of 5 families located in Easterhouse, and this really informs my social justice conscience in terms of thinking about public space and safety, and and civic responsibility, and having civic responsibility. So, and as part of that, in 2011, I founded Out of Sight with Whitney Chassey, and we've supported 100 plus public performances in Chicago. And how this happens is we receive grants, and we've consistently received grants from Wicker Park Bucktown and the Dr. Edward S. Orszag Foundation over the last 10 years. And those grants directly go to support the artist's production. So Out of Sight as an organization works in a voluntary capacity, but all the artists are getting paid through the granting that we receive each year. So there's no additional, we don't have a bank account accruing interest or anything. So really thinking about how artists are supported in these like financial ecologies. And in 2015, we were supported by DCASE and the Propeller Fund for additional programming that we were able to do that year. And you know, we've really we've created screenings every year of the documentaries that we fund to present artists' work, and we've also organized symposiums as well as part of the program, like the up and coming one that we're doing at the end of this month, April 22nd. So I want to share with you a little bit about how we started working as a community of artists in 2020. So when the lockdown happened, I reached out to Out of Sight alumni and to see if people were up for live streaming performances. And at that time, none of us knew how to live stream. I have a digital video background, so working in technology is not something that is foreign to me, but I received the instructions from ESS and basically taught myself so I could train the artists. And we really went to, and all the artists I reached out to for the first performance on May 26th said yes. And as part of moving into this online, I also was thinking about how to create support structures, community. And one of these aspects was to facilitate collaborations. So Mikkel Samama was a student of mine at the School of the Art Institute, and Martine Vial is an international live action performance artist whose work is incredible. And knowing both of their practices, I invited them both to collaborate and see what happened, and it was exquisite. And I think I'm going to share some of the collaborative works that we've curated each time. And what is interesting about this moment, or about the movement from live performance in situ to the screen, is that as artists, we have started to define our own image of ourselves. So we are so this idea of subjectivity and the narrative that is created is changing through the media of this current moment. And I think that's something that I spoke with Megan Morbidix in her artist focus talk. We started to discuss these ideas. And I think this is something that is quite important. And through the artist conversations, we were analyzing through our reflective conversations that we've had bi-weekly over since the lockdown happened, we've decided to hold sacred to this idea of live. And so all of the performances, some have recorded elements, but there is this essence of the live experience. And this was a collaborative performance, again, by one of my students, Vanessa Dion Fletcher, and Ma Zeringa-Go, who is based in Spain and was an artist that so after the first performance, the artists really wanted to select the next artist to perform in the next series. So several people nominated different artists from around the world. And so, you know, really thinking about this sense of community ownership, community voice to the collective rather than the individual. And this exquisite performance by Vanessa Dion Fletcher and Ma Zeringa-Go again is thinking about these intersections of the screen and the idea of the macro and the micro, and how we perceive and modes of perception. And this was a collaborative performance by Elena Katsoulis and Erin Pysert, who have done a lot of collaborative works with Out of Sight since 2000. I think their first work was in 2012. They've done works in the snow at Christmas with us. And they hadn't collaborated for about 6 years because Erin Pysert had been in China, and this was a durational work thinking about time and the act of falling. And so this last performance of February 26th, I invited the dancer and movement artist Sheila Toledo and to create a collaborative work with Rachel Bunting. And these pieces are very special, and unfortunately we were taken down due to aspects of nudity within the work. So they were only able to be seen on that night. So we're really hoping we can screen them again. But here you see two live birds on top of Sheila's head as she sits in a bathtub. And, again, thinking about the synchronicity of these works. And Rachel Bunting, both of these performances started in the bathtub. And that was very just a magical, synchronous connection that just happened through happenstance between the artists. Neither knew what the other was doing. But I think, again, these images by Rachel Bunting really speak to the sensuality and the re-envisioning that we can create when we start to control our own image. And I think this is what's interesting about this particular moment in media history. So where are we for time, Sophia? How much longer do I have?
We're at about 30 minutes through our hour. So I just love seeing your work. If you have more to share, I do remember that I would love to see a little bit of the footage of Elena Katsoulis and Erin Piro, that piece, or your piece, Utopic Dialectics, at some point.
Okay, all righty. I'll zoom ahead to that, actually. I wanted to talk about neighborhood magic because that is a really important public engagement project. But I'll talk about that another moment. But let me move on to utopic dialectic. And so this specific performance came out of this research where I was invited by the city of Lucerne to interview 8 women about their important life moments. And I'm really interested in this idea of oral histories.
Mm-hmm.
And then after sitting down and listening to the people, the women who were, there was one woman from every age group from 20 to 100. I then wrote a poem and handed it to the person as a gift. And then in 2018, I was invited back to Lucerne to perform those poems for the participants and the families. And when I do these projects, it's really important that the curating body who invites me organizes a public performance at the start of a residency, so I can share my previous work, and this enables an opt-in process. So this body of poetry is quite a fundamental piece of work, and these, when the poems are reperformed to the city, it actually holds up the mirror and kind of reveals and addresses some of the concerns. And Abelassa Lohenberger, who was the youngest person I interviewed in Lucerne for the project, had suffered severe racism in the education system in Switzerland. And this had detrimental effects in her being able to formulate friendships. And this was the center of our conversation. And so looking at, how these systems of violence are in operation, or revealing these systems of operation. And so that I'm going to now share. So out of that body of work, I came to think of, I realized that the idea of speech, action, and play were really important elements. And in 2000 and
I'm sorry, I'm not actually seeing anything on the screen right now.
Yes, I know. I have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just giving a little brief introduction.
Okay.
That's okay. And I created this. So this performance that I'm about to show incorporates the poetry from Spare Rib Project, and really was in response to Brett Kavanaugh being elected to the Supreme Court.
my body were bound between two sleeves of a book jacket, what would it say?
Would it perform out of the page, or would it be stamped? That piece goes on and on. So,
how long was that piece in its entirety?
It's, I think, two pages.
Oh, but in the performance, what was the duration of it?
Or the duration of that particular piece is 40 minutes. Well, it depends on how many people are participating.
Oh, okay.
So it can be 30 minutes, 40 minutes, it kind of, or an hour. But that was a piece incorporating this idea of speech, action, and play that came out of this project. And again, thinking about work that is responsive to our times. And my body of poetry is really based on that perception and observation in that level. So.
It's a visually stunning piece. Very beautiful. I imagine you spend quite a bit of thought and planning on the visual aspect of your work.
Yes.
As a visual artist and as a designer. How much of the content of the meaning of a piece, your intentional meaning of a piece, is visual as opposed to conceptual or?
That's an interesting question. I start off with the ideas, and I think the ideas come first for me, and then I have a whole visual aesthetic that I work in that then gets employed and woven in, and I have so much to draw from, especially the most recent work. But the concept and the idea is pushing the performance forward, and so it takes on a life of its own.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's when it is so generative and restorative, and just fills me with so much enthusiasm in the process of making. It really becomes the creativity becomes transformational in that sense.
Absolutely.
I want to start by asking you a question.
No, I want to ask you. No, you want to ask me. No, I want to ask you.
No, we could talk all day. We're going to talk. So what is the relationship between nature and performance in your practice?
It's interesting that you're asking me that question. I think that it's a blind side for me. When I went to China, my practice changed considerably from being a spoken word artist that felt I could deal in all environments. That being said, I have almost always done my works in a contained space. I haven't done a lot of street work. And so I guess when you say, what is my relationship to nature? Nature I'm understanding as an unmediated space. Unmediated by human construction or settlement. And that's what I'm thinking of as nature. So I haven't done a lot of work. There have been works that I have done where I have, for example, I took a story written by a friend of mine about a natural habitat that was taken over by the homeless called Hobo Jungle in Ventura, California. My friend had written a story about that Hobo Jungle. The characters were set there. They were growing their own gardens and things and living. And a lot of drama happened. But I went and I brought a tape recorder, like an old cassette tape recorder, and I orated the story, recording it in the location where it was composed, hoping to capture some energies some creative energies, iterations of intention and narrative within the natural setting. And I would have to say that I would like my relationship to nature and my work to be closer. I would like to do more work out in open space. But one further part of my answer to your question is that I am entirely focused on natural elements.
I was going to say that. That's where I was wanting.
Yeah, in the 5 elements, the 5 Chinese elements, and then also the 4 Western or earth, air, wind, and fire. Those 4 elements that go around in the symbol that Hitler appropriated for as a swastika. But the 4 natural elements and the 5 of sort of the Indo-European tradition, I guess you could say that, and then the Chinese 5 elements. I focus a lot of my works on the exploration of metal and water, wood, fire, earth, and the cycles that they go through of creation and of destruction. I would say a lot of my work has always been a meditation upon those natural elements.
Yeah, and I particularly saw that in the last performance you did in, I think it was January or February.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think moving, like in terms of poetry and performance, how do you see them? How has that relationship evolved for you? And where do you see it like growing to now? I think, you said you started off as spoken word, then you were in the Chinese, and this goes back to this idea of local and global.
Yes.
Being a migrant as well between different spaces and how that informs your practice.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be, how much time do we have? All I can tell you, to make a very long story short, is that I tried performing in English, read my audience. They weren't enjoying it. They weren't feeling it, even if it had bodily movements. Then I realized that probably body movement, dance and visual aspects are going to be my best friends here. So then my first performance that I did in China was actually, what I did was I took a Han Dynasty poem, so from about the 1st century of the Common Era in China, and I translated it. It was by Dong Zhongshu, and I translated it into English. And every time I came to a word or a concept that was difficult to translate, so in the places of error, in the margins, in the where the mind had cognitive dissonance moving between those 2 language and semiotic systems, I composed a new poem based upon that cluster and knot of meaning that wouldn't be smoothed out between the languages, and then read that poem. And then had that poem translated. So I was kind of relying on translation. And that was quite interesting to do. I think it was kind of lost. It was technical, but so my next piece was kind of in a rebellion to that, and kind of, I'm going to do what I showed Zhang Mi had done in her piece. I'm not going to articulate words. I'm going to use Arthur Rimbaud's poem about vowel sounds. And I'm going to only do a piece based upon vowel sounds. And I hope that they can hear in their soul some tone of soul. And because vowels are always shaping sound. And there's sort of, in some belief systems, there's a belief, in some mystical sects, there's a belief that the formation of sounds in our mouth actually shape our cognitive processes. So I was kind of working along those more magical lines. And then finally, in the piece that I wasn't able to show a lot of footage of, where I'm actually dancing and wearing the mask, I created 3 levels of presentation. So as guests came into the gallery, was that time we did have a gallery. We actually installed a bar in the gallery and in any case, guests came in and I read my poems, no mask on, directly to their face. No performance, no stage. And most were pretty freaked out because they're like, wait, is a person talking to me? But she sounds like she's orating. What is she doing? Then when it was my turn to perform, I had translated my poems and I put the mask on. So there's a further level of representation, like a further level of abstraction. And then I orated the poems. But then I had another performance artist hidden read my poems aloud, and I actually danced to them. And I felt that actually communicated my meaning the best. So just exploring ways of communicating. But it has been, the next step was to compose in Chinese and share that with audience members, but it's always quite unsatisfactory. Like I'm not, the Confucian saying of 词不达意, like you just can't arrive at the meaning through language. So the best that you can do are all these permutations or attempts at expressing it. And then the difference between those iterations will somehow communicate your meaning. So it's a process. It's a work in process, Carron, figuring out language in a foreign country.
It is. And that piece that I just showed was structured to take to other countries and think about, how language is actually embodied. And when you were talking about exploring the relationship of the vocal cord, the nerve of the voice is connected to the heart, the vagus nerve.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And thinking about, how voice, love, and, care, actually, or love, love is so integral into this area. And I'm very interested in that, aspect for many reasons.
Yeah, I was hoping actually that we could, I know we want to talk a little bit about the Flow Symposium coming up.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could give just a minute or two to talking about your ecology of care. I know you've done some writing and some performing about that. I think it's such an important, something very important to share. And I hope you can.
Yeah, well, this really came, so I was invited to write an article about this, and it came out of my research in interviewing women from around the world, and particularly these 16 women in Lucerne and Liverpool, and it became structured into this idea of speech, action, and play, thinking about our own bodies, and thinking about the external. So the internal, how we work in space, in place, and also how we care for our own bodies. And curator, the word cura, actually means care.
Wow.
Cura is the Latin word for care. And this kind of goes into my philosophy for out of sight. Because I don't dictate what, as a curator, I'm not dictating what people do. And I think when we moved online, I have a particular way of working as a curator where I don't go to people and I say, I want you to do this, this, and this. We have an application process, people submit their ideas, and we select an artist's work based on thinking about, is this a new work that we're going to be supporting? And is this part of their oeuvre of practice? So will this be, a stepping stone in their own destiny, informing their own practice? And, when we moved online this past year, I said to the artist, I love what you do. So I don't need a proposal. You are artists working. I have total trust and faith in what you're going to do. And so that is the model, and I really don't go in and sometimes, if I see through the rehearsal process that an artist isn't quite, you know, they haven't got in that extra step. I try and, go in and support and have a conversation, but that doesn't always work. Some people aren't receptive to it. Some people I've worked with over a longer period of time, and I have a professor-student relationship with them. So they want that from me. So it's a hard, sometimes that's a hard balance to make, but really thinking about these reciprocal forms of like how one takes care of one's body, oneself, and yet also, just thinking about these threads of care. And this goes back to I was brought up in the Quakers at an early age. And so, looking at, and this is why I think Out of Sight is so important, because it's really about bringing joy, and joy being an antithesis to violence and to harm. So thinking about that. But we do want to, I do want to throw it out to the audience. Thank you for joining us here today. Do you have any questions for us? Please type them in the chat. And we're getting lots of comments in the chat.
Great.
Show us the 5 element. Mud Clay Hound is asking to show the 5 elements from 2021.
You mean the recent piece? Astra 8, the recent piece. Okay. I can direct this. Thank you so much for Mud Clay House for your interest in this piece. I can tell you that on the Sophastre, SOPHASTRE, one word, Facebook page, so my performance moniker is Sophastre. You can go on that timeline, and that Astra piece is, go ahead and scroll down and you'll find it, or on the live videos. It was streamed live, so it is there. I would love to show it to you, but we're just a little bit limited on time today.
We can put the link in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so how do you want to, shall I show the little video?
You're talking about the Flow performance?
Flow Symposium?
Oh, the Flow Symposium, Performance Symposium? Yes, but can I just first say, I want to let everybody know that I first met Carron. I had found online an announcement for a performance of a whole evening of live performances online. It was still kind of new to me at that time, online live streaming. And Random Acts was the name of the night of events. And so I met Carron corresponding, getting the links and figuring all that out. And I viewed it, and it was the being in quarantine and lockdown for so many months. But I would have to say that even if I hadn't been in quarantine for so many months and hadn't had a chance to go to museums and see live art or any art, that night, watching those performances by those artists, and even including the Katsoulis and Pierre, and Aaron and Alina's piece, it was an elevated artistic experience for me. And thank you so much for that. And I've been an avid fan of your work and everything you do. And I'm really anticipating the opening of the Flow Symposium, I think in a couple of weeks from now.
Yes.
Yeah.
On April 22nd, we are opening this, and it's really an international convening artists
Yes.
around the world, which
Renowned artists.
yeah,
Must say. Yes.
yes, and Sophia has helped with those connections. And so we have Alistair McLennan from Belfast, Ireland, Robin from China, and Dimple Shaw, who's in the right now. Dimple Shaw is going to be presenting her current research on public performance in Karnataka, which is South India. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Dimple. And Dennis Blacker, who's a UK and Spain-based artist. So really, people at the top of who are really world-renowned performance artists, and we're really. And then the wonderful thing about this symposium is the practice-based workshops. So if you apply for the Ebb and Flow ticket, which incorporates the full suite, you can take a practice-based workshop with Marilyn Arson, who just recently, this book has been published on her work, and we've arranged a 30% discount for conference participants. And this is kind of a seminal text for public performance. And so you can sign up for 3 workshops. I'm doing a live streaming in 3 sessions. Martine Vial is doing a workshop based in live action. Kirsten Heshusius is doing a workshop on it called In Situ. So it's really, and Callum Eccleston is doing one about aftermath documentation. And so conference participants can sign up to do 3 of these workshops that happen over 4 or 3 days at 90 sessions each day. And out of that, create a performance that in week 3, you can live stream.
Yeah.
The program.
Yeah, I got my ticket. I'm gonna get to do a work. I'm so excited to work with 3 artists in these workshops. Martine's and
really, and B. Shaw is doing a workshop on negotiating ritual and looking at feminine energy and the goddess.
Wow.
And I mean, she is you know, a shamanistic artist and does really incredible interactive public performance internationally. So we're really, it's really, and we hope that we bring people together to go through this training with these experts in the field, but also to engage in a dialogue about how we can create healing and regrounding and transformation of public space. I mean, there needs to be a reclamation of public space as we exit out of the lockdown and pandemics. And actually, Martine was just telling me that in France, where she's living, they're going into a lockdown on Monday, where they're only allowed to go, they can only go 10 kilometers from their home. So this idea of, you know, public space you know, is something that we really need to kind of be talking about. And
sure, yes.
At the moment.
We're not only exiting lockdown and quarantine and the whole COVID experience, we're also exiting the Piscean age. So there's so much to be done to reclaim public space and set the stage for what's about to hit. It's going to be great.
Yeah, yeah. So please get your tickets. Ebb and Flow is up on the website. The Steady Stream will be coming available, and that's a ticket just to attend all of the lectures. There are 12 lectures, and by really incredible people. I could go on and on about that.
And I do want to mention sort of one of the most amazing parts of the symposium, if it wasn't incredible enough, is the live stream training that you, the Queen of Digitalia, as well as Xeria, is going to be leading. What an amazing experience learning how to live stream in this day and age and moving forward. It's always going to be useful to be able to communicate your message, your medium online. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, and Out of Sight is all about facilitating the dialogue. And as a community, we do that in diverse ways. And I have to say, we really are and it is the community of Out of Sight artists that have really created and envisioned this symposium that we're organizing called Flow, Embody, Insight. So,
wonderful. And you'll put the link to that
in the
so this video can be viewed later on. In case you came to this live stream late, you can view this our recording archived on Twitch TV Out of Sight,
and on the YouTube Out of Sight Chicago. So,
and it would also be on Facebook, but Facebook
has censored us.
Has censored.
So let me just. So yes, if there are no more questions about, are there any questions?
Do we not have questions?
The Public Performance Festival. Otherwise, we are going to say thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Really lovely to have all the warmth of your energy in the space. Thank you to you, Sophia.
Thank you, Carron. Such an honor to be here with you today and to know you and to learn about the outside artists and to meet them and to view their works. And this is my second year in the experience, and it's changing, it's growing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I've just, we learn so much from being together and listening to each other and learning. It's a lifelong learning, isn't it? So thank you all so much to everybody here in the space and to Sophia for joining me in conversation for the Artist Focus. All the conversations are archived on our website, and next week I will be in conversation with the Israeli artist Mikel Samamar, who is talking about embodied insight, is a really incredible artist. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. And we're here every Saturday at 11:15. But next week will be the last Artist Focus in the spring session. And we're excited we'll be working with new artists this next year. So we'll be excited to be in conversation with them in the fall when we come back. So have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Saturday, and happy Easter to those who are celebrating.
Thank you so much, Carron. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.